Today we're looking at the 2002 remake of Solaris, starring George Clooney and directed by Steven Soderbergh. Although we do refer to Tarkovsky's version as the original about 100 times in this review, be aware of the 1968 TV film making this technically the third version of Solaris. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. It's that simple. And today we are doing a Patreon vote winner. Our patrons got to vote between 3 remakes, all of which the originals had been done before in the show. And the winner was Solaris, the 2002 version of Solaris, directed by Steven Soderbergh, starring George Clooney. And that is what we're going to talk about today. And that was an interesting thing for David, because David had not watched the original yet, because he wasn't on the show when we did that. So he had to go watch the 3-hour Russian version first.
Yeah. So we're going to structure the show a little bit weird here. We're going to give, as Pete has described it, initial thoughts, my homework, and then spoilers. Or spoilers and then homework, however you want to call it.
Yeah, so normally at the very end of the show, David's got like a homework movie where he's went back and watched something we did on the show before he joined it. For this episode, we're going to actually kind of insert that sort of at the start of the spoiler section, just because I feel like it'll be impossible not to refer to that movie as we're talking about this one once we're into the nitty-gritty of it. So it just makes more sense for David to get his thoughts out on that earlier in the discussion. So that's what we're going to do. But of course, as implied, we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers. And of course, if you're enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube, and you can get bonus shows from us every month on Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end at the episode. So, the basic premise of Solaris is that a psychiatrist, played by George Clooney in this case, is called out to the Solaris station, which is just a spaceship or a space station that is orbiting a planet called Solaris, because something weird is going on there. And it's intentionally very vague when he gets called out. He doesn't really know what to expect when he gets there. So I'm not really sure how much I should really spoil about what's happening there, but just to say that there is something affecting all of the people who are stationed there. There has been deaths, there has been psychotic breaks, and he is going to go in and see which type. And it is something science fiction. Something is happening because, presumably, of the planet. And, so I'll leave it there. I'll leave it quite vague, because I do think the actual going-ons tend to be kept secret for the most part, I think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the trailer for this gave a lot more away. I have no idea. I
mean, it's difficult for us because obviously we go in knowing exactly what it is, having seen the previous. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this was just common knowledge going into this, rather than this is something that was kept secret.
I don't think anything that happened in the 1972 Russian film was common knowledge to the most of the audience in 2002.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Like, it's the question of, did people going into this just think, oh, George Clooney, I like a George Clooney, but he was in the Ocean's 11 recently. Like, did they think that, or did they purposely market this movie as like art house, like as an artistry sort of film where it's not about the action, it's about the message?
Yeah, and we should probably mention as well, as much as we're going to refer to this as a remake quite a lot, technically it's based on the same book that the original movie was based on. So it's another adaptation of the same source material, technically, rather than a remake of that movie. But, I mean, the actual difference there is pretty, interchangeable. It's not a big deal. So, so we'll get into it. And I'll ask the question. David, what did you think of the 2002 version of Solaris?
I have absolutely no way of talking about this movie without referencing the original. It is so incredibly difficult to me.
That's a very good point. Maybe we should do a little bit of the homework. Maybe we should split the homework in two and do a little bit of the general impressions first, so that you can then properly talk about your feelings on the 2002 one.
I'll give very broad ideas on the 70s version. The 70s version is absolutely well done. It is a philosophical deep dive into all of these different things that, like, it's got maybe like 6 or 7 different like themes that it explores based off of things like what is humanity, and all the way down to like what is reality. Like, it changes all these different ways that you look at it over the course of the movie. But it is 3 hours. It is a 3-hour-long movie in Russian, very slow-paced. It is a meditative trance of a movie. By comparison, this movie is a speed run. Dear Lord, this movie just is like, all right, here we go, boom, and it's done. And yes, it cuts an hour out of the runtime. It is a much shorter movie, but because of that comparison, I couldn't help but think, oh my God, we're not getting anything out of this movie. This movie is just like throwing all of this stuff at your face and saying, here's the philosophy, moving on. And then we just keep on going because of that. It has its points. It has its differences to it where it does something that is unique to this movie, but I don't think that anything it does is an improvement on the original. I think that it is something where it is a little bit of a modernization, a change for more modern audiences of what they would appreciate out of the movie. And there are some things that it changes that I think are straight up making the original, like it's taking away from the original. It is making it a worse version of it overall. So there are moments to it I like. I do think special effects wise, it works pretty well. I think that the overall tone of the movie is correct for the most part. There's one spoiler thing that I can't really get into, but I think for the most part, I like the tone it's going for. It's just by comparison, it's a sprint, whereas the other one was a marathon.
Yeah, I love how in all that, I mean, there's a bit of an illusion, but you didn't actually make it that clear if you liked the original that much there either, which is a very tactful...
Yeah, I'm trying to save that for the homework.
Okay. Very, very tactful approach there. I already talked about the original on this show, so I don't have to hide my feelings on it.
Yes.
Also, I'm realizing at this point I forgot to open this before we started, so I'm just going to enjoy the sound effect now.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Enjoy that.
You know, I can't help but think that if I did that in the middle of an episode, you'd chew me out.
Yeah, but it's my show, so I announce it.
Oh.
I make a bit out of it, and it's fine.
I've been on this for over a year now, but it's still your show. Got it. I know where I stand.
Like just you got to announce it. You got to proudly make it a part of the show.
Gotcha.
Rather than sneaking it like a little deviant in the background, try to get away with something you're not meant to.
That's fair. I do that a lot. I fidget with a lot of things on my desk, and I try not to make that much noise.
Yeah, he's fidgeting with a lot of things under that camera. I don't want to know too many details. Anyway, so my feelings on the original Solaris were very positive. I love the original Solaris. The only like negative to the original Solaris I really had is that Tarkovsky's other movie, Stalker, was like perfect. Solaris was pretty close to perfect in comparison, but like you say, the original is this slow, like almost like experience rather than a movie that's like tied to like a. I mean, there is a plot, right? And the plot is in this movie for the most part, and it's much quicker. But the original movie is a lot more with sitting with the moments. It's a lot more enjoying the cinematography and really contemplating the philosophy of what a lot of the things mean, and there's a lot of suggested elements, and there's a lot to interpret. A lot of the review, when I did it with Tara, was talking about what we felt the movie was saying, what it meant, so on and so on. It's a really, really thought-provoking time. And I had just avoided seeing this one, not before I'd seen the original necessarily, but since I'd seen the original, I'd kind of just avoided this one, because I didn't really want to watch a remake. I was like, I don't know, it was kind of like it was perfect as what it was.
It's probably the same sort of feeling as when they eventually do a Back to the Future remake that I'm gonna have, where it's like, I don't do that. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, maybe I think maybe the best comparison I can think of from like original to remake, or original adaptation to a new adaptation, is actually when I saw David Fincher's Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, and it was such a weird experience, because it was like a year or two after the original came out, and I saw the original when it came out, and I remember just sitting there for the Fincher one going, for people who didn't see the original, this probably will do something for them, but I just feel this weird sense of like retread like the entire time. Like I don't get. So you've got that feeling in this, but I also felt, like you said, this speed run quality to it, where like it would say just enough to introduce the idea that was in the original. It would say just enough to say, okay, here's what's going on right now at this part of the movie, and then it would move on. There'd be no time to sit and contemplate that, and like the original has times where the character has to get used to an idea for a while, and you'd spend a good 10-20 minutes of different scenes of like processing this new status quo that we're in this movie speeds through everything. There's a few changes, of course, as well. I mean, and I don't remember everything perfectly, so I'm sure there's some changes that I didn't notice. But
Yeah.
like this movie speed runs through so much, and I cannot watch this as someone who has not seen the original. It's just physically impossible for me to experience it that way. And what's so wild about it is that it's still a very art house movie in how it's presented, and I feel like there will be an audience who find this and care about it, because there's definitely when I looked online, there does seem to be a cult following for this movie. Like, so there is a group of people who have been enjoying it for the past 20 years, and it is what it is. But I feel like the people who this appeals to are far more likely to be into checking out the original anyway.
Right.
That it's kind of like a weird thing, because it's not turned into a mainstream action movie, even though I do think some things feel a bit Americanized and dumbed down a little, just to make it a bit more, well, 100-minute friendly, if nothing else. It definitely feels like it's pulling some punches in that sense. So yeah, the overall experience was kind of weird. Like, I just kind of felt like I was sitting there going, oh yeah, and here's this version of this section, here's this version of this section, and I was just never that engaged with it. I was never really getting into it or enjoying it. I felt especially the backstory to the husband, which I'll be very vague about here. I felt like in the original it's very abstract, and you're sort of piecing it together as you get little bits here or there, and you're sort of like, whereas this movie kind of says, no, here's like a bulk of flashbacks, like one after the other, in linear progression, detailing very easily what the backstory is that we're sort of exploring in his mind. And that I don't know, it felt a little bit too streamlined, and like it was losing some of its like identity being presented that way. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think this is a bad movie, but I do think the comparison to the original is damning for me in just about every sense.
Yeah. I think for me, the problem is that because it's so streamlined, it really focuses in on one specific element of the plot. And I don't think it's spoiler to say it's romance. It is the romantic lead between the two here. I think that's where it gets its pure focus from. It really dials in on that. And the issue that arises is that you lose all of those other themes, all of those other ideas of like, you know, alien life, humanity, reality. All those other philosophical talkings are immediately stripped down to maybe half a conversation if we're lucky. And everything else is just redirected to how do we make this romance work? Not to completely go against everything you were just saying here, but as you were talking, I was literally just watching the trailer for this movie to see how they marketed it. It's romance. I don't think they don't even show they're in space. They open up with them on Earth and like show them in a happy relationship. Like there is nothing to say that this is an alien planet.
That's pretty funny, actually. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that would be a bad choice. If you said, oh, we want to do a sub 2-hour version of Solaris, so we're going to strip out the other things, that would, I mean, it's a shame for a lot of reasons, but I don't necessarily think that should make for a bad version of the main thing it's focusing on. The problem is, though, is that even the romance parts, I still felt like they were sprinting through in a way where I didn't really feel the weight after the big beats, or like it felt like the abridged version that's jumping from the plot point to plot point when there really is meant to be time spent between those plot points, with the characters really sort of taking in what they're. I mean, a good example of a big difference is that in the original film, there's a whole section, sort of about 2/3 or so in, where the characters are just kind of living on the station, and they even have like a little birthday dinner for someone, and it's like a whole extended sequence, and eventually something happens that affects the characters in the conversation. Whereas here it's like an earlier conversation just sort of has a part of it tacked into it, but it happens so much earlier in the story without like someone even like I'm wading into waters that I can't go into. So
it's so difficult.
I think it's a lackluster version. If you at all care about the original, I think this one just comes up short. And if you've seen just this one and you really like just this one, that's interesting to me that it has that effect in people. Because I really cannot tell how I would feel about this if I hadn't seen the original.
I was actually debating contacting you beforehand and saying, hey, do you think I should flip around the viewing order? Do you think I should watch this one and then watch the other one just to be able to like have the alternate view? But ultimately my schedule did not line up to watching a late night 3-hour long Russian movie.
There you go. Yeah.
Had to watch that a bit earlier. But yeah, no, it's this. Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment where it's impossible to watch this without the original in mind, and it's so difficult to divorce the two that anytime that I have a critique, I try to figure out like, why is that bothering me? What is it in this movie that's bothering me? And there's some things that are actually with this movie, but most things, it's just the comparison to the other version of saying how that one did it in a superior way, and it's difficult to divorce the two in my mind.
Yeah, and even something as simple as casting. Like, I like George Clooney well enough as an actor, but I do think compared to the original, he's too much of like a movie star who's kind of likable in a weird way. Where,
oh yeah,
you know, so much of like the main character is about, okay, he's this guy that we're kind of disconnected to, but he's flawed and he's got his demons, and like, you know, so much of the movie is about him sort of examining his past and like what he's feeling guilty about and all, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like with this, and maybe part of it is because they don't hit those things hard enough, but I felt like I felt like in the original, at a certain point, I really got that, oh yeah, this guy should feel guilty because he's not been a great person. I almost, in a sense, we just did Paris, Texas recently on Criterion Cut, one of our Patreon shows. Check that out. But I love that movie, and I almost would describe Solaris as like a trippy sci-fi version of Paris, Texas, thematically, at least as far as the main character's relationship, like, sort of themes go.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right? Whereas in this, well, yeah, George Clooney's got stuff to feel guilt or regret over. It never felt like it, like, oh, he did something villainous. Like, you know, he was not the character in the original did something like an evil villain would, but it felt like, oh no, you were kind of a dick in some ways, and I kind of like see why you would feel like genuine guilt. Whereas in this version with George Clooney, it kind of feels like, okay, yeah, obviously there's moments you wish you'd done something else in, but I don't necessarily think you're bad or in the wrong for the way you reacted to one or two like big things that it makes a big deal out of, you know? I don't know, it felt a bit more like it was letting him off the hook.
Yeah, they make him a lot more relatable. In the other movie, they get the backstory of this full apathetic, like just removed from life, all of his relationships, and he's just this very sullen man. And then the movie shows how, given a second chance at certain aspects of that, he takes that and how he evolves and changes over time. This one, everything that is shown about him makes him George Clooney. It makes him this attractive, laughable guy. And does he have bouts where he gets overly emotional at some things? Yes, but the movie goes out of its way to get you to relate to that, to get you to understand his viewpoint. So that way, when it comes back and shows him trying to get that quote unquote second chance, it just feels like it was always something that was out of his control, something that he didn't really cause in the first place. Yeah.
And like we say, so much of that stuff was rushed that I didn't even feel like I got to the point where it felt like he was... Yeah, okay. You know what? We have to just go to spoilers because the point I want to make, I cannot make, and it's this is so.
If one thing before spoilers here, I will say that this one had this recurring soundtrack motif throughout it, a very like futuristic-ish sort of like synth piano mix going on there. I really like that. I think that it was a solid score to this. I think it fit the tone of it pretty much no matter where it was used. So it did well there. And then obviously because we are in space to an extent, there is obviously multiple special effects of looking down on Solaris, the planet. I think that for 2002, it was a very good effect. It still stands up today. Nothing really stood out as it looks janky or anything like that. So did a good job there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So yeah, okay. Spoilers for Solaris. Yeah. Technically both versions really, but I mean, it's kind of impossible to talk about this and talk about like where we think it's either like matching or not matching the original without also saying what the original did. So be warned. But if you've seen this and not the original, I mean, you may still want to stick around and listen to this, but I do highly recommend checking out the original and giving that a chance and really think about it as you're watching it. It's definitely a movie you have to pay attention to and think about. It's not.
Yes, God.
It's not a light-hearted watch by any means.
I sat down to watch that, and I was absolutely not in that mindset of like paying attention and doing that for 3 hours. So I had to adapt very quickly there.
Yes, very good. So okay, right. So just first thing in spoilers, just broad idea what the movie is.
Well, should I do my homework, or do you want to go?
I'll do the sort of the synopsis of the spoiler part, I guess, first, just quickly, just to set some context here. So In both versions, the people on this space station get visitors. That's how they're described in the first movie. I don't know if they say in this one visitors much, but
They do. At least every once in a while.
yeah. So the idea is that someone from their past appears on the station with them, and it's not like just a vision they're seeing. It is someone that everyone else can also see, but it is someone who is there from their past. And there's some debates kind of, and they're open to interpretation, but generally it's agreed they're based on the memories of the person that they're tied to. And it seems to usually be someone, if not always someone, that has died in that person's life. So in the main character's case, his wife, who had committed suicide, starts appearing on the station. And it's clear that this has been happening for everyone, and that's why things have been kind of weird here, because it's making them all go crazy. Either some people are really into it, some people think it's a threat, whatever, we'll get into all the specifics later. But that is the gist of what is happening, and it's an opportunity for the main character to kind of like have a second chance with something that isn't really his wife, but appears to be his wife. And one of the big differences, actually, between the two, is that in the original, I really felt this sense of growth and change in the visitor wife, where she kind of like slowly became aware that she's not a real person, but then kind of becomes her own person. And then what does that mean? There was like a whole development to that side of things in the original. In this one, like she like turns around for 2 seconds, is like, I'm not real.
It's one scene. We get this gist where they're just laying in bed and she's like, oh, I don't remember how I got here. And then over the course of like 2 minutes, she gets all of her backstory, all of her memories. She remembers how she died. And she's like, oh, I'm not real. I'm fake. Okay. My character is now at this point.
Yes. I should die again. That's
more
anyway. So we'll talk more about that. But yes, so you watched the original for the first time. So now with the idea you have to hold Etten back, like, how did you feel about it?
I think it's very well made. I already said that before. I think it's a very well made film. I will say that maybe it's, the mindset I was in or whatnot. I think that the length of it is something that is both a necessary, it's a necessary evil. It is something that it's there so that you can get all of the things that he's doing and have that sort of meditative trance quality to it. This idea of taking things slow and just really working through the philosophy of it. But it is. And
I'll jump in there and say that's what she said. I was choosing my moment because you said the thing about the left is a necessary evil to get all the things that he's doing and all the trans qualities. And I'm like, oh, this is just adding to the greatest. That's what she said of all time.
To really take it in deep, to really feel it deep within your body. It's there, but ultimately it is something that, because it is so slow and so meditative, it is at some points difficult to really give all of your attention 100% of the time to really working through it. When you did the review with Tara, you specifically said that this was you watched it like twice, pretty much back to back, in order to watch for the review. I did not have time to do that, but I feel like that would have been really helpful for me. I think that's something where you go through it once and you are able to understand the ideas it's playing with. You know how to accept the movie and what it's doing, but then a second time around, you're really able to engage with it on the smaller scale level. So all in all, I do recognize that's a very well-made movie. I do like the philosophy that they're playing with, the ideas of what counts as a human. If it has all the memories of somebody, looks exactly like them, is it the same person? I like those ideas. And then on the other side of that, the idea of humans are very egotistical in a general sense. This idea that the line that's repeated in both movies is that we're exploring the stars not because we want to discover, but because we want a mirror. We want to be able to see ourselves no matter where we go. And I like that concept. I like the way how it then is interacting with this idea of Solaris is this completely alien concept, this thing that we have absolutely no way to relate to, but we're still going to try to put ourselves into that. And Solaris is meeting us halfway there. It's doing that and allowing us to see ourselves in it. So all in all, it deals with some great big ideas, also ideas of immortality in a certain sense and being able to go back to your past, get a second chance. But again, the length was the thing that was really setting me off here, is that while it's necessary to get its ideas across, it does at certain point feel like it is just kind of slogging through. Tara made the point, and I agree with her, is that I think that the first 45 minutes of the longer cut, while necessary to setting up the points later on, are absolutely just a testament of you are either going to sit through this or you're not going to enjoy the movie at all. Like it is basically a filter for the audience to say, you got to get through this if you want the rest of it. So all in all, I think I'm probably going to come down to it on like an 8. I think it is very, very well done, but it is something that it is requiring a very specific type of audience member who knows what they're getting into to go into it.
Someone who enjoys Kino, perhaps.
Yes. It is absolutely Kino.
Yeah, and funny enough, it is a Criterion movie, so while it's a sci-fi movie, so it got done on Ace, it technically is a bit of an overlap there with the Criterion show.
But it was done before we did that, so whatever.
Well, even then though, like Stalker, like is technically sci-fi, and it's also Criterion, and I don't know where we put that, honestly.
Audience chime in. Do you want it behind a paywall or do you want it free?
I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily care about us watching another 3-hour philosophical movie where the sci-fi ideas are mostly kind of abstract.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. That said, though, if you've ever seen Annihilation,
I was thinking about that movie during a lot of this because it did strike me in that same sort of this is truly alien.
Well, Annihilation definitely was heavily inspired by Solaris, but certainly Stalker, because Stalker is even about characters going into the zone, which is you know, an area. I don't know if there's not a literal bubble in the same way, but it's kind of the same idea. So yes, looking forward to covering that at some point. Anyway, This is going to be a different conversation than we normally have, because normally we go through, we look at the movie on its own merits, we talk about what's working, what's not. But I have to be honest, like, I never didn't have the comparison in my head. The entire time I was watching this, it was physically impossible to ignore that I knew the original and just take this for what it was. And a good comparison point that really frustrated me was... So a big plot point that happens in the original, as well as this one, is that the first time his dead wife appears as a visitor and he doesn't know what's happening, he freaks out and he puts her into a pod and jettisons her into space, right?
Yep.
And in the original, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like there was a bit more of like a build-up to it where he was leading her there and it wasn't... Whereas in this one, it snap cuts to him shutting the door basically in her face. And it feels a bit more abrupt, but... Regardless, he does this, right? It's in both movies. Solid plot point. And of course...
The other movie has like a little bit of a lead up where he has to like get her into a spacesuit, and we see that he has to like cut her out of her clothes because they were literally like made on her. They weren't, she didn't put on the clothes. They were made on her. So it gives you a little bit more of that alien thing where he realizes this isn't her, this is something else. I need to get rid of her. That's
something the original movie does a lot better as well, is this idea that a lot of the creations from Solaris are close, but are a little bit off. It's a lot like AI making things, actually, when I stop to think about it in a weird way.
There's a lot of overlap with current AI talk, especially with all the ideas of like AI girlfriends and whatnot. Jesus Christ.
And what's so wild is that when me and Tara did that movie, it was before all these conversations started. Times have changed so quickly. But anyway, so she comes back, of course, the next night, right? And there's a whole moment where he's with one of the other scientists on the station, right? Jeremy Davies' character, who he's like, hey, she can't ever know what I did to that first one. Right, she can't know that I jettisoned her into space, and Jeremy Davies is like, "Yep, sure. No worries. I won't mention it." I cannot believe how quickly this secret comes back up. It is astronomically fast, because as soon as like the wife is back again and they're talking, they have a meeting with the other two characters, and the other character's played by Viola Davis, and Viola Davis is like talking about them like they're not real people. We should do this. We should do that. Are they a threat? Whatever. Right. That's a lot of stuff she's talking about throughout the film. But at the end of this scene, she just blurts out, oh, yeah, but what if you're going to try and take her back to Earth? Maybe we can pick up the other one on the way back. Oh, wait, you don't know? You don't know what he did to the other one?
Oh, he didn't tell you. Well, guess I have some leverage.
Yeah, and I'm like, how did this come up so quick? Like, I was expecting this to be something he admitted to her, like an hour later. You know, something at an emotional moment when he's been honest.
this is like the end of second act, beginning of third act, like liar revealed sort of plot point. But
Yeah.
no, here it just comes up and she's just like, oh, that sucks. How dare you?
Yeah, it's like 5 minutes later. It kind of really threw me off how quickly that came back up. But that goes for a lot of things in this movie, just how quickly it seems to rush through things that, because there's a whole thing in the original where she eventually wants to commit suicide again, and it succeeds, but then because she's not human, actually sort of resurrects, like basically goes through this painful resurrection process. And that happens in this. But like in the original movie, it happens so much later, and it's triggered because another character, like when they get angry or annoyed, like just throws out like oh, you're not even real, you're not even a person. And it's that idea that she thinks, oh, I'm not real, I'm not valid, I'm like a fake thing, that like depresses her and makes her want to die, and that's why she tries to commit suicide. In this movie, it's a bit more like she just remembers that she was suicidal before, and she's realized she's fake and now wants to commit suicide. Like it's very quick, and it happens so early in the movie comparatively to the original. Like I remember like checking the time around here and went, wait, there's only like half an hour left. Like what? Like yeah, wild stuff.
That's the other issue with this, is because of this refactoring, because of the way that we are ditching the philosophy and turning it into more of a romance. The other Americanization or modernization, however you want to call it, is we have to have not a different third act, but a differently structured and something with a bit more flair, something with a bit more action to it. And it's not, it's not like a fight scene or anything like that, but it is spelled out much clearer what is going on. And also they expand on this entire thing that was not in the original, of one of the crew members actually was replaced all along. And we get this whole reveal of like there's a body hidden in the floor. It came out of nowhere and it felt so strange.
That moment's it sort of sets up because the movie starts not exactly like the original did, because the original had a lot more build up to like him leaving, but he's on his own. We see he's a therapist, and like he's kind of like zoning out. He clearly is a bit detached from life, right? For whatever reason he's sad, but he's a therapist to other people. And then out of the blue, 2 agents show up. One's played by John Cho randomly, and they're like, "Hey, we've got a message for you." And they play him this tape from the scientist on the station, who's an old friend of his, someone who turns out to already be dead by the time he gets there. Gibarian.
Gibarian, yes. Or Gibarian.
Gibarian, yeah, one of the two. I almost said Garibaldi, but that's a character in Babylon 5. So he, he's like, hey, you need to come up here. Like, you're the one person I trust to come up here and maybe like fixes. Like, none of us, like, we're all going through all this stuff, but we also don't want to leave. Which is the intriguing little hook of like, wait, what is it then? Like, why wouldn't you want to leave? It's because they're reunited with their dead loved ones to some extent. So
and he's being so purposely vague about it because he knows he has to submit this through the company. First off, I like the transition of when they Americanize it, they make it so it's not a government thing, it's a private industry, because that's America. The other part of it is that the secret agents or whatever that come in, they basically explain they disabled the AI that's guiding the system. They won't answer our calls. We sent in a security force, but they went missing as well.
Yeah.
So you're our last chance. You got to go up there and do it.
Yeah, and it basically just cuts to him like approaching the ship. And to be fair, the original does that as well. It's not like you get a big whole 2001 journey or anything like that. But like, it cuts to him approaching the ship. He gets out, and it kind of mimics the original, probably the closest for this little section, I would say, just because at least in my memory of him getting out and looking around and like seeing like a child run away at one point and be like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, he spends like a good half an hour of the movie just going around to the different like. There's 2 people on the ship. He's expecting a third, who obviously was the guy who contacted him and killed himself already. But then he sees little hints. He sees tiny little things of, oh, I saw like a child running behind me and I'm not sure where he was. And oh, I saw this other stuff. And then in this movie, it's all just stripped down to be, okay, he sees one kid running and there's some noises from the captain's room. And that's about it.
Yeah. And you see some blood, which later is the reveal, of course, that there's a body up there. It's the body of Jeremy Davies, because he's been a fabrication this whole time, which is, I mean, I suppose it's interesting in the sense that, like, depending on who he, like, Was he copied from his own mind? And if he was, it's interesting, I guess, that he's still here, even though the person that created him is dead, if that's where he came from. But I'm not sure it makes that clear either.
There's a weird 50-50 thing where he mentions how the person who was his visitor was his brother, which I took to mean that they were twin brothers. And then, there was just...
I see.
There was that instant where he's looking at himself, he freaks out, comes at him with the knife, and then the visitor defends himself and decides to take the place. But it's not made clear in the course of the movie whether or not that's actually true or not.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting to me if it's, because that feels like a, given everything else going on, it's, obviously this is very contextual, but given the context, that feels like the simple logical explanation, where I'm more interested in the idea that somehow we ended up with a copy of someone who was actually already there. And what does that say about himself, that he's dreaming about himself, like he's got no one else to dream about or something, whether that's like an interesting science fiction thing or just a personal psychological thing, regardless, that's a bit more interesting to me. But it is kind of weird because it feels like it's there to have like a shock twist later on.
Oh yeah.
But to be honest, I think that's the other problem I have with this, actually, is I find the other characters in this to be nowhere near as important as the original film. Pardon me.
Good.
They're just there.
Yeah. No, it's this... I kept on waiting for the birthday party scene. I kept on waiting for the moment where they were all going to sit down and we were going to have tempers flare and everyone was going to be like saying their side of things. But ultimately what we ended up getting is Viola Davis acts like Viola Davis in pretty much every movie I've seen her in. And then we have Jeremy Davis, who's like the weird guy.
To be fair, given what you just said about Viola Davis, Jeremy Davis also like acts like Jeremy Davis, and
I just haven't seen him in that much other stuff, but that's fair.
Also, I'm realizing their last names are Davis and Davies, and I'm just it's actually really confusing saying them both back to back. But I think it was him in particular though, because at least Viola Davis still has like the, not antagonistic, but she has a different opinion than the others, right? So she's at least.
I mean, if George Clooney is the protagonist, then yes, she is the antagonist to what he wants.
Most technical possible definition of the term. But like the character of Snow, Jeremy Davies' character, they do a whole thing where they give it this big shock twist that he's actually been one of the visitors the entire time and the original person is dead. Well, whatever the explanation is for that, the original version's dead and he's not been real the whole time. I'm like, okay, what are you going to do with that, movie? And then it proceeds to do nothing with it. It doesn't matter.
He literally confesses to it, says, yep, I killed him and I've been taking his place the whole time, but the movie's got 10 minutes left, so you just need to wrap this up. I'll stay here. Bye.
Yeah,
and okay.
All he does is deliver some exposition, and then that's it. And it's not like it's exposition he only knows because he's a visitor. He's just been monitoring everything while he's been here. This is just all information he's gleaned whilst being alive on the station. So it's like, okay, so like, I don't know. I felt like they never really did anything with him, whereas in the original movie, it felt like the other characters were these opposing points of view and every philosophical idea the movie was playing with. And, so.
I think the issue is that because we lost so much of the extra philosophy. So one of the biggest things that we lost in the adaptation here is that the idea of interacting with Solaris itself, the idea of they are like trying to send down like X-rays, they're sending down pilots to interact with it, they're doing all this stuff in the idea of humanity has the compulsion to understand things. It needs to understand things on its own terms. But Solaris...
And a big thing with Solaris, the original, is this idea that Solaris itself is studying them as much as they're studying it. This idea that we're sending down probes or we're sending down someone in a jet or something to go down and explore. They're sending up visitors. They're not so much that the visitors are agents on its behalf, but this is how it functions. It's creating these visitors out of our head to see how we react to it, to see how we respond. And all of these ideas are gone. Even something, because there was a whole thing. I remember like a whole story in the original about like a pilot they sent down, and they talk about what his experience was and what he thought he saw and all that. That was
before we even got up there. Like that was in the opening 45 minutes of the movie.
That's right.
It's just him saying this to the government. The government saying that, well, you're crazy. And that's not how it works, because it, again, is furthering that idea of humanity needs a mirror. Humanity is egotistic, and we need to understand things in our way. All of that plot line is boiled down and condensed into Viola Davis saying humanity has to win. Like, it's just trimmed down to this idea of all this internal monologue and this back and forth of whether or not humanity is like the right way to view things, or if, you know, we can have a truly alien idea of something that we don't understand but can exist separate from us and completely different while still coexisting. It's gone. And it's all replaced with this idea of the planet did some weird stuff to us. We didn't even touch it. Like, it sounds like a kid who just knocked over like a vase, and it's like, it just fell over on its own. We don't even know what we did.
Yeah, there's a lot of theorizing in the first film about why Solaris is doing this, and even the idea that Solaris is giving humans what they think they want by, here's your mirror, here's like fake versions of the reality that you won, that you've lost.
You've experienced some sort of loss. Here you go. I fixed it. This is what humans want, right?
And is that good enough? And it's something that the people themselves question. It's something that the visitors themselves, when they become self-aware and realize what they are, because it's not like they're like secret agents that have been sent up by the planet. They are new beings created like in that instant. So they're just sort of discovering what they are, mixed with all these memories of what they were created from. And it's this idea of like, well, okay, you're not technically actually his dead wife, but are you something new that should have your own rights? And therefore, what does that say? What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know? Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, but that's the thing that this movie then decides to kind of hint on. That's, again, the idea as to whether or not the visitor, the wife visitor, who's named Rhea in this, the original, it's Hari, something like that.
Yeah, it's not pronounced Harry, like the guy's name. It's like Harry or something. Yeah, like however you pronounce it.
But she's Rhea in this, and the idea is that they almost immediately get to. Again, they sprint down the road to this. Is okay. We accept that she's her own person to an extent. Does she have the right to kill herself? Like, does she have the right to say, okay, like, I'm done with this? Because George Clooney, he's got a second chance with her. Obviously, he's got some guilt, which is all stuff we'll go over. But he wants her to keep on living because he's guilty about her death. Whereas Viola Davis thinks, no, this is an alien threat. We can't take her with. She's got to go one way or another. But then Rhea's opinion, because she is based off the memory of this suicidal person from before, and also she recognizes that she's not the real one, wants to kill herself. She wants to end her existence here because she is just that upset about it. And what the movie toys with for a very long period of time is, does she have the right to do that? And it's its own little philosophical question of, you know, is assisted suicide basically a moral thing to do? But ultimately, it is a completely separate idea as to whether or not she is real. That doesn't apply anymore. It's much more down the idea of one person's willing to assist, the other person wants you to live, and she has to come to the conclusion of whether or not it is the moral choice to make.
Yeah, it frustrated me as well how they rushed a lot of this stuff, because it felt like Rhea never even really talked to the other characters. Like in the original, she like she actually starts to interact with the others, especially in the group scenes. And the scene in this where she's sitting at the table next to George Clooney, the meeting they have that ends with the revelation of what Clooney did to the previous, you know, visitor that he had. Like, she just sits there quietly, like the entire scene, never interjects, never like. Because I was like, oh, you know, say something and have Viola say, well, you don't get a say in this because you're not real. Like, you know, escalate her or do something with her, you know, her presence there. And instead, it's just kind of like her having some looks occasionally, especially when Viola Davis is like, hey, I think I can kill them. I think I figured out a way how to like fire neutrinos at them and they'll disintegrate. And she's like, huh? maybe voice your concerns. Do you want to live? Do you feel like you should live?
Yeah, which, to be fair, is a plot point in the original movie, is that they are debating whether or not to kill the things. But the counter to that is that they have an alternative plan. The alternative plan is, let's keep on interacting with the planet. Let's give it more information and see if it can learn something about us.
Yes.
This is like, the annihilation is the only plan. It's that or nothing.
You're the little plant, the leaf that grows in the original. It's a whole thing. And I guess it also gets to this philosophical nature. Is like at a certain point, does it matter, like where these original things came from if life is being created? Like at a certain point, if she becomes self-aware and has her own feelings and desires and whatever. The fact that she looks and sounds like someone who existed already, is that even important to the question of whether or not she should be alive? And it's also interesting that this movie just immediately jumps to Viola Davis saying, oh, we can't like go back with any of them still alive, because what if they follow us back? What if everyone on Earth starts having this? Our entire civilization will just collapse, and maybe that's what Solaris wants. Like, she just immediately sees it as a threat. And don't get me wrong, that's a valid thing to do in a science fiction movie, is examine the way that some humans will just see alien life as an instant threat. Right? Lots of good stories about it.
And that's also when Viola Davis puts together the Suicide Squad in order to deal with the threats that we can't possibly imagine.
Yeah, but we get to, here's this chamber we built, and we never even get to see who Viola Davis's visitor is. But she just says, yeah, I killed mine. I was able to do it, and they didn't come back because of the way I did it. So that's it. It's done. And obviously, if you pull yourself up a little bit and you look at what the movie's doing, and you're like, okay, so it's examining these ideas of people, these visitors being literal interpretations of these memories that are haunting people. And Viola Davis has designed a way to kill it for good so it can never come back, right? It's almost getting into a little bit of that Eternal Sunshine thing. Like, if you can kill the memory of something so that it can't haunt you ever again, should you do it, right? So you're getting into a little bit of that territory. And she's obviously taken that plunge. She's done it without really thinking about it. It's gone. And George Clooney doesn't want to give up his wife, but obviously what murkies it is that the visitor, his wife, does want to go away. She's like, I'm not real. I don't want to be here. I want to go and just end this now. And it's an interesting point as well. She says at one point that because I'm based on your memories, and because like if you remember anything slightly wrong, it means I'll have that imperfection. I'll have the imperfection that you remember. But because you remember me as someone who committed suicide, I'm always going to want to have that urge. And I almost feel like if I was writing this story, forget adapting anything, but if I was at this point in writing this story and I had a character say that, to me, my impulse would be, well, the story of this movie then should be her breaking out of that and like having her own desire and realizing, no, I don't have to be what he remembers me as. I can be something of my own.
Yeah, and that's kind of the issue with the movie here, is that what they end up doing is they make her a blank slate to start with, and then she slowly starts gaining the memories. And by the end of it, I think what we're supposed to take from it is that she fully develops into the real true Rhea. She actually has enough memories to be able to say, I am this same person, but she recognizes like physically that she is not. But there's no growth past that. There's no moment where she becomes her own person, independent of Rhea. She just views herself by the end of things as the pale shadow, as the alternate version of Rhea. This, like you said, the obvious writing thing is show her become her own person. Show who this new version is, and being able to make her own decisions independent of the memories that George Clooney built her off of. It make her her own person, but it's not that. That's not what we're going with here.
And it's that line that specifically got me thinking about that. Because in the original, I never had that even concern. Because in the original, it's kind of happening that she's becoming a person. She's starting to enjoy being alive to an extent. And it's the reminder from another person that she won't be accepted as real that drives her to suicide. It's this more tragic story to me in the original of what leads her to that decision. And, you know, ultimately the main character, you know, tries to stay awake so she can, and he takes a bunch of pills to try and stay awake, but he ends up getting a bit of a fever dream. Now, this is where things get really different in the two movies, because in the original movie, it did this interesting thing where instead of dreaming of his wife again, he actually dreams of his childhood and dreams of his mother looking after him. It's like he's retreating to a more like comforting place where he was really being taken care of, because it's like he's failed. It's like, I need to go back to my mummy, right? That's kind of like, you know, that's the most dumbest possible way I can say it, but that's effectively what he's psychologically doing. And then waking up to find out that no, she did successfully get killed, and she asked the other crew members to do it. In this, he just kind of has this like weird fever dream of like her talking to the little boy who's running around, who's like the visitor of the guy who's already been dead for ages, right? That's why there's a boy running around. Yeah. And he wakes up and she's left a video message in this version saying, hey, I did this, don't blame them. Like, I wanted this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, all right, so you've done this. And obviously, the end of both movies is pretty similar. I think the original does it way better, of course. But the end of
Yeah.
both movies is effectively the main character has given in to the idea of living in the fabrications, the memories of the life that he wanted, right? You know, and I think the original movie does it in such a cool way where like it's actively creepy when he's like, oh, you know, you think he's back home, you think he's back on Earth where his dad lives out in this sort of farmland next to a lake, and but then he has that weird moment where he looks into the house and it's raining indoors but not outdoors, and it's that like, oh, the imperfection, like the planet couldn't create that right. And then the camera pulls back and you see that there's islands, and part of the reason why these islands were even forming is even set up in the original movie because they say, hey, we've beamed some of your like, you know, ideas down to it, and it started forming these islands.
They took his like that's where the entire structure goes completely different, because during the fever dream when he's picturing, you know, his mom and all that, they apparently took a brainwave pattern or whatever and beamed it down to the planet to basically tell the planet, stop with the visitors, we don't want this, stop it, that's not good. But then when he goes down, that's when it starts turning into this island thing and like making an entire civilization for him, because it is what he truly wants, is to get this second chance to do this again. Yeah. And this movie, what it comes down to, like you said, the fever dream is no longer focused on the parents, because we've written out the parent plot. Like the entire thing about how he was distant from his father, gone. So it's focused much more on Rhea. It's focused much more on what's going on in the space station, and then just brief glimpses of when he found her dead in the apartment and was upset about that. But it immediately then turns and pivots, because the ending of the original never had Rhea's equivalent die. She was just around. She was there the entire time. And he just somehow gets back to Earth and goes back to his father's place. And that's when you see it get weird. In this one, once Rhea kills herself, we get a little bit of an argument between him and Viola Davis. But then we start getting into the stuff of, oh, turns out Jeremy Davies was replaced the whole time. And he's the one that's saying that the spaceship is going to crash into the planet. And it's that, it should be that ambiguity of, does he escape off the planet or does he crash into it? That leads you to believe, oh, is he on Earth? Is he not? But the movie thinks you're an idiot and decides to say, we're going to tell you specifically that he did not make it off the planet, that he is specifically down on Solaris, and that he's literally going to have his dead wife show up again and say, don't worry, everything's fine now. We're all on Solaris.
Yeah, we don't have to worry, because he actually says the line, am I dead or alive? And she's like, oh, we don't have to think like that anymore, right? We're together. Yeah. And it's kind of like, oh, Solaris has become this afterlife. Because there is one conversation in one of the flashbacks where they're having like marital troubles. And they're at a dinner party with his friends. And the other scientist guy that he knows, Garibucci, whatever his name is. Gabarian, that's what his name was.
Sounds like you were just messing up Gary Busey.
Gary Busey was there, yeah. And they're having a debate about religion, and she seems to believe in the idea of a god, but the rest of them don't. And he's debating with her, right? And I'm like, okay, this is where some of the philosophies maybe try to like get shoehorned back in, because certainly this idea that Solaris is such an alien thing that we might look at it as some kind of god, because it's literally creating life, it's creating islands, it's creating these visitors, it's doing all this stuff. Maybe it's a layman way of looking at it, but you can see how you could sort of take that and talk about what this place is. And is Solaris effectively become an afterlife for him? Can he just live forever now here with his wife, even though, like, and that's the other question: is he really him here, or is he just a visitor version of himself here at the end?
True, because he does heal up like instantly. That's the other thing that they show, is the reason that he starts suspecting is they have this mirroring scene beginning and end where he's chopping zucchini and he slices his finger. In the real world, he washes it up, but he still has to like hold a compress to it so it doesn't bleed. In the ending scene, he slices his finger and he just immediately heals up as he goes to wash it. So I think it might very well be fake as well, but I think that's also an interesting visual theme that they make a change here, is that Solaris in the original version, and I think also in the book, is very much portrayed as an ocean planet. It's very much portrayed as just
100% ocean. Yeah.
And it's this idea that it is deep and unfathomable and unknowable, and like it's just this swirling pattern that you're never fully going to understand. Whereas in this, it seems like the visual they're going for a lot more is a brain. It has these electrical like impulses and these things that are going about. And it doesn't seem very watery. Like it's got a little bit to it in that it's a bluish hue, but it's very much this electrical planet rather than that. And I think the change there of changing it from something that is this deep, unfathomable, unknowable to a reflection of humanity is kind of just furthering that idea that they're dropping the concept of it being alien and more of it's this extension of humanity. It is this further thing that humanity could not understand, but it is still on the same scale.
I think that's a sad loss because one of my favorite things about that original movie is just how truly alien this place is, right? And obviously it's doing all these things thematically that link into all these other ideas of reflections and our memories being imperfect and the theme of like projecting like who you want or what you remember someone as, and you know, is that the real person or not, all that stuff. But fundamentally the planet itself is this truly alien thing that's trying to like imitate and recreate and getting things slightly wrong, and it's so effective at feeling truly different and unknown. Like there's a real sense of like just this awe-inspiring sense of we do not understand this, and the characters are trying but just can't quite understand it, and the only hints we really have is how it seems to be trying to understand us. I think that like from a like concept perspective, it's one of the most uniquely original science fiction things I think I've ever like seen or read. It's I think it's beautiful how mysterious it is, and so much of it's just kind of gone here in favor of just focusing on one element, and then that one element is, and that's the thing, we've barely even talked about the core of that element yet, which is the flashbacks and how like he goes to sleep, he thinks about his past, and it's presented in, I mean, it's a little art house, but it's mostly just very linear flashbacks. Here's the first time he sees her on the train, here's like him meeting her at the party, he goes over and talks to her for the first time, here's where they have the first kiss, they have a little montage of having sex. You know, it's very much just by the numbers going through the beats.
They do. The only thing that I thought was gonna be a thing, something that was gonna have some sort of thematic resonance, but I never caught it, was they do this thing where it like fades to black and then comes back, but as far as I could tell, very rarely is it ever actually like skipping ahead. Like for the most part, it is just holding in the same shot, same scene, even the same conversation. And it just goes to black at some points and comes back. And I'm not sure what that was supposed to represent by the end of it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, it's going to start showing the cracks of how he, you know, like what his problematic sides were that maybe is why he's going to feel guilty. What made the relationships start
to go down where he's able to be like, oh, I messed up significantly here.
But we kind of skip ahead, like, you know, we kind of skip ahead to where they're already having lots of problems, and she clearly is depressed, she's going through a lot of things, and the big incident really that everything ends up revolving around is that she got pregnant and didn't tell him and had an abortion, and it's actually the day where he finds out this, where he gets mad and storms out, that she commits suicide. So it kind of like makes it all about this one thing, where I think there was a lot more nuance to it when it was more just, no, how he treated her and took her for granted on a day-to-day basis for a long time was, you know, is what like made her feel the way. It's the idea that he was slowly contributing to her depression by not understanding her and not like meeting her on her terms, by like, and they kind of get to that a little bit in the like conversation where he's mad at her, where he says, you know, I can put up with you know, you changing jobs every 3 months and you doing this and you doing that, but I can't. But I can't do it on my own anymore. I have to. And he kind of like a few times says to her something like, and in fact, when he tries to give her the sleeping pill at one point, and she doesn't want to take it, he's like, no, you should take this. This is fatigue. It's like he's trying to like diagnose her with his like, you know, his degree, and it feels like, no, you're not really listening to her. You're just trying to label her in an easy to label way, so you can like put it in a box and say that's that dealt with. So it's there a little bit. But it really all ends up just being, no, he stormed out the day that she revealed that she had been pregnant and, you know, dealt with it behind his back. And that's it.
That's really what I cannot stand about this version, especially comparing it to the original, is that the original version has it be not anyone's fault. Like it's everyone is to share some of the blame here, even people who are not around, because the original one had this whole thing where, yes, he was emotionally distant. Yes, he had problems connecting, but ultimately it was because his mother didn't end up liking her and they got into a fight, and then he didn't like back her up or anything, that it all just kind of snowballed from there. This one, I think the line that damns it the most is literally when they first meet, because it's at a party by Gibraltar or whatever the hell his name is.
Gabarian.
Yes.
Do you know what's so bad is I'm pretty sure that's the same name as the character in the original, so it's really bad that I can't remember it.
It's missing an R, but yes. So he sees George Clooney staring down Rhea, and George asks something about like, oh, you know, who's she, how's she doing, or stuff like that. And Gabarian says the line, oh yeah, go talk to her, but you should know she's a handful, or like she's got issues, something along those lines. And that immediately moves all of the onus of how things go wrong from him to her. Yeah. It immediately says that all of her mental problems are her, and that he is not responsible for any of this. And it is such a disservice to the evolution of the character. Also, just watching the scene back real quick, just skipping through things. Yeah. She comes back for the second time after she's sent away via spaceship around the 38-minute mark, give or take. The entire sequence of her figuring out her past, seeing that she killed herself, all that stuff is wrapped up by the 48-minute mark.
10 minutes.
10 minutes of this movie for her to completely define herself as a character, figure out exactly where she is, and then not change anything else past that. Also,
maybe I'm just not remembering it, but I don't remember the original having a lot of mushy how they first met, staring at each other scenes. That was very much, this is like for the audience we're trying to make this more romantic, so we're going to have like their entire first meeting on the train is just staring at each other. She's just staring at him with the big eyes and being like, oh, you want me, don't you, George?
Again, it changes it to a romance. It absolutely makes it a romance movie first and foremost, and the science fiction philosophy is second rate at best.
Yeah, because in the original, the characters are a lot more fully formed, and like you say, like, yeah, he's messed up, but he sort of examines he's messed up because of his parents. Both his mother and father have contributed to this in some way. And she's also not this guiltless character either. Like, she also has her own issues. It very much feels like, no, we're all human beings, and the movie is largely exploring what it means to be human. So it's like, hey, we all have our faults, we all have our biases, we all make mistakes, we all have our things that make us sad, upset, angry, whatever. This movie doesn't feel like it's doing that. It feels like it's hinging things on like simple to understand plot points. And while that works for certain types of plot, because of what this story is supposed to feel like, at least what the original movie felt like. I mean, I've not read the book. I have no idea if the original movie is like super authentic to the book or whatnot, but
I'd assume that is at least somewhat closer than this was.
I would assume so as well, but I think that's just because I like it better.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's more accurate. But yeah, all the flashbacks in this just kind of left me feeling really cold, to the point where, because they're split into little chunks, right? We kind of went through it in one batch there, but like you get a little bit of the initial meeting, and then there's the bit where they're just talking about getting married, and that's like a little chunk, and then there's eventually when they're getting sad at the dinner party and having more fights, and then there's the eventual actual like, you know, suicide day conversation. And after the first one, every time it went to a new batch of them, I just sort of went, oh, here we go for another few minutes. Like every time I kind of felt a little bit of, okay, let's get over it then.
You get the initial batch of them, and that's directly like all the good moments. I think it even ends on like the sex scene, but that's what leads up to the first one showing up. And then obviously he wakes up, sees that she's still there, because they have sex that night. He thinks it's all a dream, and when he wakes up, he's like, "Oh God, it was real. You're still here."
Yeah, and her cuts actually. I think you can see some shots of them in the spaceship bedroom at some points.
Yeah, what I was questioning about this scene, I didn't like it as it was first going, but as it progressed, I was okay with it. Is that he immediately starts quizzing her at this point with the first one? Like he immediately sits her down and be like, what's the last thing you remember? What do you know about this? What do you know about that? He's basically trying to verify, are you you? Are you actually you? And it seems like she passes. It seems like she's getting everything right. She's saying everything right, but there's still, again, there's that difference from the original movie where the original one showed how she had to be cut out of her clothes because they were just fully formed with her. This one, she seems like she's passing entirely. The only thing that happens, and it's crazy how speedrun this one was as well, is that as he goes to leave the room to talk to the rest of the crew, she freaks out. She starts freaking out.
Big thing in there, right? Like it took a long time for the visitor to like feel comfortable being left on her own, and that was like part of her progression to feeling more like a unique being. Is that I'm not tied to him. I don't have to follow him around like a puppy.
But this one, she freaks out. He comforts her, saying like, "Hey, it's okay, we'll go together, whatever." But then he leads her to the spaceship and sends her off. She's now going off into deep space. Second one shows up the next night, and like immediately, because she's already gaining back some memories again, he's like, "I'm gonna go talk to the rest of the crew. Are you good?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead." It's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the original, doesn't she like disappear at times as well for a little while?
Yeah, a little bit.
Or goes to sleep. There's definitely periods where it's like, she's not here right now. I remember that being a thing.
There's periods where she's at least, staying in the bedroom, she's sleeping and whatnot. I don't think she ever like phases out of existence or anything, but she doesn't need to stick around him for any period of time.
Yeah, that's right.
But again, that takes like an hour and a half to even begin getting to that point. Whereas this one, it's between maybe 15 minutes of the movie where she's just like, "Oh yeah, I'm good. Go on. Talk to your friends. I'll be here."
That's the big thing, is that almost nothing in this movie had the weight for me that it felt like it should have. And again, a lot of that is comparison to the original. If I was to guess, I don't think I would like this movie that much if I'd seen it without the original. I think I would be a little bit miffed by it. I think I'm more negative because I've seen the original. Yeah. But I don't think I'd love it. I don't think it would like hit me in the way that it should.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. It's being stripped out of all the philosophy and all the like, perception of reality and what does humanity talk. I think that once it turns it into just a romance that happens to be on a space station, that's where it loses a lot of its draw and its potential. It's something that is a completely different product of adapting this material. Like, I'm sure that you could make an adaptation of like any book that has a romantic pairing in it and rewrite it so that it is a romance and that we just disavow everything else that's going on in it. But that's not what made Solaris interesting. What made Solaris interesting, I think, for both of us, is this concept of the truly alien and the idea of having to relate to that and like finding yourself within something that you have no relation to whatsoever. This is I'm upset my wife died, but I'm glad I got a second chance at happiness with her. And there's a market for that, but it is not a huge Venn diagram with the market for the Solaris audience.
Yeah, and there's also like a real irony as well in the original film of like, oh, all we want is a mirror, but when we actually get the reflection, we're kind of horrified by it because like it's almost again like the ego is like we're my eyes I've got a bigger stomach than my stomach. My eyes are bigger than my stomach. That's the phrase I was looking for. There you
go. You got it.
Right? But but instead of food, it's like, this idea of, we want to like see all of our great. Oh no, we're actually not that great. Oh no, we're very flawed. And oh no, the mirror's too good. We're actually seeing all of the imperfections and just how messed up we are. Oh no, why did we want this? Like, that's kind of a part of what the original movie is, and all of that's just lost in this. And as much as you keep saying it is more of a romance, I agree, but I don't think the movie is admitting that to itself. It's kind of like doing it, but kind of pretending that it's still all these other things and still wants to have all that other vibe. And I think the music typically, especially, is going for that ethereal quality that I prescribe to the original.
Yeah.
But it's not actually hitting that.
When I say it's a romance, I am 100% looking at how this was presented to 20th Century Fox's marketing team, and they had to figure out what in the hell to do with it. And they landed on romance to the point where I got one little trivia bit I want to share. Apparently, at some point, they tried to use the tagline, or they were going to use the tagline, "Love Never Dies," to sell it, but they couldn't because it was being used by Bram Stoker's Dracula, and they didn't want to ape on that.
I mean, that was a decade before, but...
It was, but...
Fair enough.
I guess they didn't want to relate to it.
I guess it was too soon. It was too soon. Couldn't use the same one too soon. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not a big Steven Soderbergh guy. I've not seen I've not seen a ton of his movies, but the ones I have seen haven't left me too... So I think he did like a really weird little thriller called Unsane, which I thought was okay, but otherwise I've not been really... I saw not the original, but the first Ocean's movie that he did, and was just kind of whatever by it. yeah, I don't know. I've just
Yeah.
never really found myself attracted to a lot of his
Oh,
movies.
I mean, Peter, it was produced by James Cameron.
I know. I saw the Lightstorm logo at the start. That's his company.
Does that not give you anything here?
Yeah, he also produced Alita Battle Angel, and that was shit. Like, if he's not actively directing, like, this is the way I'll put it. When Terminator 3 came out, he was doing the press for it. He's like, oh yeah, he's done it. Jonathan Mostow's done it. He made a Terminator 3. And I'm like, technically that is a true statement. He made a Terminator 3. But yes, no statement of quality is being said. So yes, no, it means
fair.
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through Soderbergh stuff, and I don't think there's anything that's really jumping out at me. There's stuff that has done well, and clearly he does have an audience to it, but nothing's jumping out at me as like, I'm really excited to see that one.
Yeah, also he really churns movies out as well. Like he has like sometimes 2 a year. Like he did that movie called Kimmy from a couple of years ago. I remember seeing the post. I had no idea that was his. He did 3 Magic Mike movies. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's a collector's cut season just waiting to happen.
You can kiss my ass. That's not happening. Yeah.
A couple of the Ocean's movies, obviously.
They did 3 of them, I think, right?
11, 12,
13.
I don't see 13.
Yes, there.
Is it? All right,
2007. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, skipped over it.
It's actually kind of impressive just how some of these I've never even heard of. Oh, he did Contagion, which I do remember that at least. I don't know if I loved it,
yeah.
but it
No,
was a thing.
I enjoyed that one, but also it was one of those ones where I watched it for the first time, maybe like 2015. I was like, yeah, it was good. But then I watched it again during COVID, and I was like, oh God, it's everything.
Oh, you don't remember Haywire starring Gina Carano?
I don't even remember Gina Carano. So, no.
You don't? I want to say she's the one who got into some bother by saying some pretty bad stuff after being in Mandalorian. She got fired from the show.
Yeah, that's why I don't remember.
Oh, I see. Oh, you were doing like
I'm doing a bit.
You were doing the Westworld. I don't see anything here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, all right. So, if there's anything else to talk about the movie, just briefly, I think for the most part, appreciate. I'm just trying to divorce it in my mind from the original. For the most part, I do appreciate the ideas that they're bringing up. I think that the things that it wants to explore, I find interesting concepts to explore. However, I think that by the time, especially once we hit the third act of this movie and we go into this thing of like, oh, we've wasted too much energy, you're crashing down onto the planet, I think it just loses it. I don't think it really has a focus on what it wants to do. It feels like it is simultaneously trying to be its own thing, but is beholden to the greatest hits of Solaris. Like it has to hit certain notes, even if it makes no sense for what this version of it is trying to do.
If it decided, like if the Soderbergh decided what he really wanted to say with his version and focused on saying it, it might work on its own right, regardless of whatever it takes out and whether I maybe prefer the original because I prefer the things that it had. If it felt like it really focused on one simple thing that he wanted to really say to the audience and use the time for, that would be one thing. But I agree, at the end of the movie, I felt like I don't know what this was trying to say. It's got that that double-edged sword of like doing the greatest hits of the original movie, but not really like actually committing to any of the things that make any of those hits work. Like what is this by the end, other than just kind of like a weird retread? And I don't really have an answer. So honestly, it's in a weird way, this was a quicker one to go through just because like fundamentally I can't talk about it without saying how it differs from the original because it is beholden to it.
What I think bothers me the most is there's this conversation where it seems like it's a dream thing. I don't think it is actually another visitor for George Clooney, but I'm going to try to remember his name without looking.
Gabarian.
God damn it. Should have given me some time there. Gabarian.
Yeah, but I wanted to see if I could remember it, and I did, so go, screw you.
Gabarian, he shows up in George Clooney's room, and he's all in shadow, and they have a little bit of a philosophical conversation.
That's right. I forgot about this, because this was a new thing as well.
Yes, it was. And they one line that they really harp on is that George Clooney is like, I want to know what's going on. I need to figure this out. And it kind of goes back to the idea that humanity needs to understand things. But Gabarian says, there are no answers, only choices. And then he goes off on basically saying, like, if you keep on, you're going to go crazy. You're going to be staying here your whole life if you keep on searching for answers. And then George Clooney doubles down and says, I am going to figure out how this works. I am going to figure out how to get her home.
He does what he just said. He ends up staying here because he's looking for answers forever.
Right, absolutely. But I feel like it's supposed to be a more meta line. It's supposed to be this thing of, don't come to this movie. Solaris is not about finding answers. It's about, the experience of it. It's about seeing how people make their choices and whatnot. It's supposed to be some level of ambiguity there. And then the movie proceeds to not do that. The movie proceeds to spell it out exactly, to say, like, here is exactly what happened. He went down to the planet and they do this whole thing and it's that. Like, it doesn't have the same level of interpretation to it because it is so very deeply spelled out what is happening.
Yeah, I also felt like maybe this isn't what they were going for, but it almost felt like to me, because this was different than The Visitors, because it was like just in his head in a dream, and the way he was in shadows, it almost felt like Solaris was speaking through him. Like this was like Solaris itself talking to him, and I didn't really particularly like that because it just felt a little bit too, you're giving Solaris a voice, almost.
It's that, I forget what movie does it, but it's like, I have assumed a form that is more suitable to your human brains.
Yes. Thing. Which is fine if it's just like a silly thing, but this is meant to be the big, like, we can't comprehend this thing because it's so alien. I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
It feels weird to ask this for this movie, but what's your scene of the movie?
God. I really don't know. I that's the thing. I was watching through the movie, but all I was thinking was like, this one's worse, this one's worse, this one's worse. I think if I had to give it to something, I was about to say the fever dream scene, but even that, like, as soon as I go to say something, the original movie pops up in my head, and I'm like, nah, it can't be that, because that one did it so much better. I think what I'll give it to is the sequence where it's revealed in the flashback that she had the abortion. And the reason that I'll give it to that is that it feels like the most emotional thing. It feels like, okay, here's the thing where it finally is like the big moment. Here's what finally cracked them apart. The reason that he does have so much guilt. I have to divorce that from the idea that everything that came before it's saying he's not to blame here, and that's almost making the movie worse. But for him to at least, he turns to his wife who's having this emotional breakdown, is begging for him to stay, and then turns around and says, if you can't make it without me, then you're not going to make it, and then storms out. At least that's something. That's something to give me that his character is not the flawless George Clooney.
Part of me wants to cheat here, and since we never used to do this bit, but back in the days, just pick a scene from the original.
Yeah. Cheater.
I'm not going to. I want to, though. I'm not going to. Though. I want to, but I'm not going to. I don't know. I guess. I thought I the movie was such like a flat line for me in terms of like my feelings that I'm trying to think of a single scene where I went, oh, this was a good moment. And maybe the best I can do is like maybe think of a moment where the performances were good or something, just because at least that's something.
Pretty much what I did. Yeah,
because that's something at least to sort of to hinge on. I don't know, maybe when she first appears and he like freaks out and like starts asking all these questions to try and determine what the hell she is and whether or not he's dreaming or not. Just because at the very least it is a good bit of performing. So yeah. I'll go with that. But it's a very lukewarm pick with this one, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
All right, MVP.
Oh God! All right, immediately out Jeremy Davies. I don't like that style of acting. The like weird guy who just throws his hands around a lot and never finishes a sentence. I don't like that. It's
turned up to 12 here. Like, I think he's fine in something like Lost. Like he fits just right when he's just a little bit weird. Here though, he's like a parody version of Jeremy Davies with the way he's like sort of losing his train of thought and he's sort of like zoning out a little bit and then he comes back to his sentence. Yeah, so
yeah, too much. Viola Davis is okay, but again, I think that she's kind of done a disservice by being the brunt of, I have to be the antagonist. We can't just let philosophy and differing opinions happen. I have to be actively working against here. So that basically leaves our two romantic leads, and it's tight, but not in a good way. It's not in a way where both of them are doing so excellent that it's hard to pick between them. It's that they both are just kind of there. I think ultimately I'm going to come down on George Clooney. I think that he at least has a little bit more charisma, emotion, and oomph in the movie where I'm looking for it. But Rhea, played by Natascha McElhone, she's okay. She's fine. Honestly, she does strike me as the exact same character that she was playing in Truman Show, where, like, even when it feels like she's upset, she's still kind of like, okay, you're just there, you're fine. Like, it's not anything too outlandish for her.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's better than Truman Show because the character works in the context of that movie.
Right.
I think here there's kind of a... I don't know.
She needed to pull something extra, whether that was like more turned up or more stoic. Because obviously the Russian movie, her character is very stoic. It is very like blank face the whole time, more or less. But so is everybody else.
Yeah, the character in this is a lot more layered. At least it should be a lot more layered than the character that she has in Truman Show. She fits the role there fine. I guess it's just kind of Clooney by default. There's no other like people that I feel like even saying. So I guess I'll go with Clooney. But again, it's a very lukewarm just cause. Like who else to pick? So with that said, what are you rating Solaris?
I think I'm just gonna come down straight down the middle. I'm just gonna give it a 5 because like. I'm looking at things that I give a 5.5 and I think, I don't really like it that much. But then I'm looking at even a 4.5, which is Krull, and I'm thinking like, this is better than Krull. So yeah, I think I just have to come down on a 5, which is I really wish that I could just have an alternate version of myself that watched this version first or this version alone and just know how that would impact my decision here. But ultimately not the case. But if anyone else has that experience, please let me know.
I think you would be slightly more positive, but not that positive. That'd be my guess. I think you'd be maybe up to a 6 if you hadn't seen the original. But I think it would flounder on its own.
I think I'd be more pissed off at the third act because it feels like it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, a 5 sounds a bit fair, to be honest. It's kind of tough because obviously it's not like got poor production values or anything like that. It's like it's reasonably well shot and all the things that you can kind of look for. It's just, it just feels kind of soulless to me. It feels like this retread, and I get not a lot out of it. So I think 5 is a very diplomatic score to give it because I think anything else just feels like if I go lower than that, it feels like I'm being spiteful because I like the original. And it doesn't feel like it's honest, but if I go higher than that, then I feel like I'm just giving it 3 points because...
Right.
So, yeah, 5 out of 10. I'll agree with the 5. I think it's the diplomatic score to hand out to this one. But needless to say, I did not particularly care for it, and I will never watch this version again.
That's fair. That is fair.
I'm good. So, and normally the homework's at the end, but obviously we've already talked about that, so that's...
Solaris,
that's
1972, 8 out of 10.
And I give that a 9, I think.
Yes, you did.
Yes, excellent. So, well, in that case, we're pretty much wrapping up the show, but I will tell you what you can get on Patreon every month. You can get a bonus episode of, 2 bonus shows, I should say, from me and David. There's the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. A lot of things like Solaris, in terms of the original, and where we'll talk about themes and philosophy and whatnot. And then there's also Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made.
And we talk about themes and philosophy and whatnot.
No, it tends to be more like how the director might be a psychopath or the unhinged, I don't know, extra in the background who looks like he wants to assault everyone in the scene or something. I don't know.
Is that not philosophy? I thought that's what philosophy was.
We could get philosophical about it, but I don't think that's what it's go for. So anyway, that is Patreon. There's also bonuses for other shows, so please do go check out if you want to support everything and help keep it coming. Next time on the show, we should be looking at Things Will Be Different, which is another movie from this decade, another recent sci-fi movie that may be good, may not be, but it may be good. So we're going to check it out and see.
Here's hoping.
So that is what's on the schedule for next time. So thank you very much for joining us. Check out Collector's Cut as well. Airport season's kicking off this week, or I should say, taking flight this week.
Oh, you dog, you.
So go check out that. If you want to hear us talk about a 70s thriller about a bomb in a plane, you can go check out that. But
Spoilers, jeez.
That's just the premise. What, you might go see Airport? Oh, it's just going to be a nice, pleasant film where people take a nice plane ride.
I was expecting to watch Up in the Air. Is that not what it's about?
No.
Darn.
You're just thinking of more George Clooney movies. That's what you're doing.
I am, yeah.
So, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and of course, keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.